The unexpected encounter. It was a quiet afternoon. Yi, a young man living in the small town at the edge of a vast forest, had decided to take a walk. He needed to clear his mind. The sun shone through the trees, casting a soft, warm light across the forest floor. Birds sang from high above, and a gentle breeze rustled the leaves. It seemed like the perfect day. As he walked deeper into the woods, he felt a strange sense of calm. But suddenly, something caught his eye in the distance. Near a thick patch of trees, he saw a small figure. At first, he thought it might be a deer or some other forest creature, but as he got closer, he realized it wasn't an animal at all. It was a girl. The girl was standing still, her small body slightly hunched over, as if she was trying to hide. Her eyes were wide, and her face looked pale, almost ghostly. Her long hair shimmered in the sunlight, and her skin had a faint, almost unnatural glow. She was staring at the ground, not moving, not making a sound. Ye hesitated. There was something strange about her. She didn't look like anyone from the village. He had never seen anyone who looked like her before. But she was just a girl, wasn't she? Maybe she was lost, hungry, or injured. You knew he had to do something. He stepped forward cautiously, calling out softly, "Hey, are you okay?" The girl didn't respond, but she slowly raised her head. Her eyes met his, and for a moment, Ye froze. There was something about her eyes. Big, so blue, so full of emotion. They looked at him with a mixture of fear and hope. It was as if she was waiting for him to do something important. Yi took a step closer. "Are you lost?" he asked again, his voice gentle. The girl nodded slightly, but didn't speak. You could see now that she was trembling, her body thin and fragile. She wasn't dressed in anything like the clothes he was used to seeing. Her outfit seemed simple, but strange. It looked like a kind of fabric he'd never seen before, something light, almost like it came from another world. "Don't be afraid," he said, his heart going out to her. He took another step forward and knelt down to her level, trying to show her he meant no harm. The girl's gaze flickered down to the ground, and Yi could see she was hungry. Her ribs were visible beneath her thin clothing. She looked like she hadn't eaten in days. He felt a pang of guilt in his chest. He had food back at his small cottage, but would it be safe to offer it to her? She suddenly looked up at him again, her eyes full of quiet pleading. Without saying a word, Yi stood up. "I'll help you," he promised, almost whispering to himself. He had never been good at ignoring the suffering of others, and this girl needed help. He turned quickly and began walking back toward his cottage, motioning for her to follow. At first, she hesitated, but then, slowly, she took a few steps forward. I felt a sense of relief. He glanced back at her, noticing that she was walking with more purpose now, though still weak. There was something in the way she moved, like she wasn't entirely human, like she didn't belong to this world. As they walked together, he felt a growing unease. The forest felt quieter now, as if the trees were watching, waiting. He didn't know why he had this feeling, but it was there, deep in his gut, when they finally reached his cottage. He opened the door and stepped inside, gesturing for the girl to follow. The room smelled of fresh herbs and wood. The fire in the hearth crackled softly, filling the space with warmth. The girl entered hesitantly, her eyes scanning the room. She looked around, her gaze resting on the simple wooden table where Yi kept his food. Yi hurried over, grabbing a small loaf of bread and some dried fruit. "Here," Yi said, offering her the food. "It's not much, but it should help." The girl reached out with shaky hands and took the food from him. She didn't say anything, but Yi could see her eyes soften. She took a small bite, and for the first time since he had met her, she seemed a little less tense. Yi sat down across from her, watching quietly as she ate. The silence between them felt heavy, but not uncomfortable. Yi wondered who she was. Where had she come from? How had she ended up alone in the forest? And what was it that made her so different? After a few moments, the girl finished eating and looked at Ye. She didn't smile, but there was something almost grateful in her expression. I'm not from here, she whispered softly, so quietly he almost didn't hear her. I'll return, ... with my mother. The words hung in the air like a mystery, and Yi's heart skipped a beat. Her mother, who was she talking about? What did she mean? The girl's voice was soft but certain. She was serious. He felt a chill run down his spine. What had he just gotten himself into? The girl stood up, looking at him one last time before she turned to leave. Her figure disappeared into the forest, leaving Yi standing in the doorway, his mind racing with questions. He couldn't shake the feeling that something important had just happened, something that would change everything. The return of the unknown the next few days felt strange to Yi. The peaceful routine of his life was disrupted by thoughts of the girl. He couldn't stop wondering about her mysterious presence, her words, and the promise she made about returning with her mother. He couldn't help but feel a sense of unease every time he walked through the forest, as if the trees themselves were watching him. He found himself looking over his shoulder more often than usual, expecting something or someone to appear. The girl hadn't come back, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she would, and when she did, he knew it wouldn't be alone. On the fourth day after their meeting, Yi decided to go into the village. He needed to gather supplies, and perhaps a brief escape from his thoughts would help him clear his mind. He didn't talk to many people in the village. He preferred the peace and quiet of his cottage, but he still enjoyed the occasional visit to pick up what he needed. As he walked along the quiet path toward the village, the morning sun warming his back, he heard something that made his heart skip a beat. It was a sound from the forest, something moving through the trees, but it wasn't a bird or an animal. He stopped, his breath catching in his chest. He had been right to feel uneasy. The girl's words echoed in his mind. I'll return with my mother. He turned around, and there, standing at the edge of the trees, was the girl. But this time, she wasn't alone. A tall, imposing figure stood next to her, someone he had never seen before. The figure was much taller than anyone he had ever met, easily twice as height, and their presence seemed to fill the air around them. They had a certain grace, a calm power that made Yi feel small in comparison. Yi stood frozen, unsure of what to do. The girl looked at him, her eyes filled with the same mixture of fear and hope he had seen before. The taller figure, the girl's mother, said nothing at first. Instead, she studied Yi closely, her gaze piercing, as if she was measuring him. Finally, she spoke. We need your help, she said, her voice calm but filled with authority. Can we stay with you? The words hung in the air, and Yi's mind raced. He had already helped the girl, fed her, brought her into his home. But now, this woman, this stranger, was asking for his help. And she wasn't just asking for shelter. There was something more behind her words, something deeper. The mother's eyes locked with Yi's. There was a strange intensity in her gaze, but also something else, something softer, almost pleading. The girl stood beside her, looking up at Ye as if she was silently asking him for permission. Ye opened his mouth, but no words came out. What could he say? How could he say no to them, especially after what he had already seen? But he also felt something else, something he couldn't explain. There was a feeling of danger in the air, a warning that told him he might be getting in over his head. The silence between them grew, stretching out like a thick, heavy fog. The mother's expression didn't change, but the girl's eyes never left Wai-Ai's face. There was a deep sadness in her gaze, as though she had seen things no one should ever have to witness. Tai. I don't know who you are, he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. But I can't just turn you away. What do you want from me? The mother stepped closer, her presence looming over him. We need protection, she said softly. My daughter is all I have left, and I will do anything to keep her safe. Yi swallowed hard. He was torn. On one hand, he felt the weight of responsibility. He couldn't just turn his back on them, not after everything that had happened. But on the other hand, he had no idea who these people were, or what they were truly asking for. What if helping them put him and his village in danger? I don't understand, Yi said, shaking his head. What do you need from me? Why did you come here? The girl's mother didn't answer immediately. Instead, she glanced at the girl, who was now standing a little taller, more confident than before. The girl stepped forward, her small voice carrying through the air. We don't come from here, the girl said quietly. We're not from this world. Our planet is gone. My mother is the last of our people. We need somewhere to stay, somewhere safe. You felt a chill run down his spine. These weren't just strangers, they were aliens. And now they were asking for his help. I don't know what to say, he admitted, still trying to process everything. You're asking me to take you in, but I don't even know what you are. The mother nodded, as if she expected this reaction. I understand, but you are our only hope, she said, her voice low and steady. We have nowhere else to go. Wai-Ai stood frozen, his mind racing. The girl's words, her mother's request, they felt like a weight pressing down on him. There was no way he could turn them away, not after what he had already seen. But what would it mean to bring them into his home? To offer them the protection they needed? And what would happen if the truth about them, about who they really worked to light? The forest was eerily quiet, and the sun, now beginning to set, cast long shadows over the path. Yi felt like the ground beneath him was shifting, like the world was changing in ways he couldn't understand. After a long pause, he finally nodded, his voice barely audible. Okay, he said, his heart pounding in his chest. You can stay, but I need to know more. What are you really here for? The girl's mother gave a small nod, her eyes softening slightly. Thank you, she said quietly, and I promise we'll tell you everything. But for now, all we need is a place to stay. As Yi led them toward his cottage, the weight of his decision hung heavy in the air. He didn't know what was coming, but he knew one thing for sure: his life was about to change forever. A new life begins. Wai's life changed the moment he opened his door to the alien mother and daughter. In the days that followed, everything felt different. The peaceful days he had once known seemed far away now. The air around him felt charged, as if the forest itself had shifted, growing heavier with each passing moment. The mother and daughter, who had introduced themselves as Lyra and Alira, were surprisingly quiet. They didn't ask many questions and seemed to know just how to behave in his home. Lyra, the mother, was always calm and composed. She moved gracefully around the cottage, her movements elegant yet purposeful. Elira, the young girl, followed, her mother closely, watching everything with wide, curious eyes. It was almost as if she were learning the ways of the world all over again, like someone trying to fit into a place where they didn't belong. At first, he wasn't sure how to treat them. They were aliens, after all. They didn't come from this world, and they didn't look like anyone he had ever met. Yet they were so quiet, so polite. They never demanded anything from him, and Lyra always thanked him when he offered them food or supplies. But there was something strange about them. They had odd habits that Yi couldn't quite understand. Lyra often stood near the window, staring out into the forest for long stretches of time. Elira, too, seemed to spend hours staring at the trees, her eyes focused on something far away. It made Yi uneasy, but he didn't know what to say. They hadn't asked for anything except shelter, and he couldn't bring himself to turn them away. One evening, after a long day of gathering herbs in the woods, he returned to his cottage and found Lyra standing by the fire. Elira wasn't with her, and the silence felt even heavier than usual. Lyra turned as he entered, her eyes soft yet distant. "You've been kind to us," she said, her voice as calm as always. "But there is much you don't know. I understand your hesitation. You've offered us shelter, but you must know, we are not as we appear." Yi frowned. He had been expecting this conversation. He couldn't ignore the oddities, the way things sometimes felt off. "What do you mean?" he asked cautiously, unsure if he was ready for the answer. Lyra's expression darkened for the first time. "My people, we, were part of something much larger. Our planet was destroyed by those who sought to control us. Elira and I. We are the last of our kind, and we've come here to hide. But hiding is never safe for long." The words hung in the air like a weight, and Eye's heart sank. He had known they were hiding something. The way they acted, the way they moved, there was always an underlying tension that he couldn't explain. But hearing it from Lyra, hearing the sadness in her voice, made it all feel too real. "You're being hunted?" Ye asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Lyra nodded slowly, her eyes not leaving his. "Yes, there are forces out there who will stop at nothing to find us. And when they do, they will destroy anyone in their path." Eye's mind raced. He had invited these two strangers into his home, had given them food and shelter. And now, he found out they were fugitives, running from a dangerous enemy. What had he gotten himself into? The fire crackled in the silence, and Yi could hear the wind picking up outside, as if nature itself was sensing the danger. His pulse quickened, and he found it hard to breathe. He didn't know if he was ready for whatever was coming next, but there was no turning back now. I don't know what to do," he admitted, his voice shaking. "How can I protect you? I'm just one man." Lyra took a step closer, her eyes softening. "You don't have to do anything alone. We have abilities, things you cannot understand. Elira and I, we can help you protect this place, but we cannot do it without you." You didn't fully understand what she meant, but the sincerity in her voice made him believe her. He knew he couldn't turn his back on them now. He had already let them into his life, and he couldn't abandon them, not after everything they had shared. They were his responsibility now. The door creaked open, and Elira entered, her wide eyes glancing nervously between the two of them. She seemed to sense the tension in the room, and Yi could see her hands shaking slightly. "I'm sorry," Elira whispered, stepping toward Yi. "I didn't mean to eavesdrop." Lyra placed a gentle hand on her daughter's shoulder. "It's okay, Elira. You have a right to know. Yi looked at the two of them, his heart heavy with the weight of their situation. He didn't know what to do next, but one thing was clear. He couldn't turn away from them. They were now a part of his life, whether he was ready for it or not. We'll stick together, he said, his voice firm. I'll protect you. I don't know how, but I will. Lyra nodded, and for the first time, Yi saw a small, almost imperceptible smile tug at the corner of her lips. It wasn't much, but it was enough to give him hope. That night, as Yi lay in bed, he couldn't shake the feeling that things were changing. He had already made a promise to protect them, but what did that really mean? Could he truly keep them safe from the dangers they were running from? The uncertainty loomed over him, but for the first time he felt a strange sense of purpose. He wasn't alone anymore. He had a new family now, one he would do anything to protect. But what would happen when the enemies, Lyra and Illyra, were running from finally found them? Would he be able to stand against them, or would he be dragged into a battle he couldn't win? As he drifted into an uneasy sleep, the shadows of the forest seemed to grow darker, and the winds howled louder, carrying with them a warning he couldn't ignore. The storm was coming, and no one knew how bad it would be. The truth comes to light. The days that followed were filled with strange, unsettling quiet. Yi spent his time thinking about Lyra and Illyra, about their mysterious pasts and the dangers they were hiding from. Every time he looked at them, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was so much more to their story than they had told him. He had promised to protect them, but what if there was more to this than just shelter? What if he was getting in too deep? That night, after a quiet dinner, Lyra pulled Yi aside. She looked at him with a serious expression, her eyes darker than usual. Something was different. I think it's time you knew everything, she said softly. Her voice was steady, but there was a tension in her tone that made Yi's stomach tighten. You've been kind to us, and we owe you the truth. He felt a sense of unease settle over him. He had been waiting for this moment, the moment when the hidden parts of their story would come to light, but he had no idea what was about to unfold. What do you mean? He asked, his voice low. He could hear the wind outside, picking up the trees creaking in the distance. It felt like the world itself was holding its breath. Lyra took a deep breath before continuing. My people, we were not just refugees. We were part of something far bigger. Our planet was destroyed, not by accident, but by a deliberate act. We were part of an experiment, one that went terribly wrong. The beings who came to our world, the ones who destroyed everything, they're looking for us. They want to finish what they started. He stared at her, trying to process her words. He had thought they were just survivors, trying to find safety. But now, it seemed there was more to the story. Who are they? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Lyra's face grew cold, her expression hardening. They are a race of conquerors, beings who travel from planet to planet, taking what they want. They destroyed our world because we were too powerful for them to control. Illyra and I are the last of our kind. They believe that if they destroy us, they will have full control over the galaxy. Yi's heart raced as he listened to her. He had been so naive, thinking they were just looking for a place to hide. But now he understood that they were running from something much worse than he had imagined. And you're the last ones? Yi asked, feeling a mixture of awe and fear. He couldn't even begin to imagine what kind of power these beings must have had to destroy an entire planet. Lyra nodded slowly, her eyes filled with sadness. Yes, we're the last survivors. But there are more like them, more beings out There who will stop at nothing to find us. They don't care who gets in their way. If they find us, they'll destroy everything, including you." The weight of her words hit Yi like a hammer. He had let these two aliens into his life, and now he realized just how dangerous it could be. He was part of their story now, and there was no turning back. "But why did you come to me?" Yi asked, his voice trembling slightly. "Why me? I'm just one person." Lyra's gaze softened, and for a moment he saw something more human in her eyes of vulnerability he hadn't seen before. "Because you were the first to show us kindness," she said quietly. "You didn't ask questions. You didn't run away from us, and you gave us a place to hide. You may not understand it yet, but you're part of this now. You have a role to play in all of this." You felt a strange mix of emotions. He had been drawn into something far bigger than he ever expected. He hadn't wanted this. He didn't even know what his role was. But he couldn't deny the feeling that everything was about to change. "There's more," Lyra continued, her voice low and serious. "The enemies we're running from these beings, they have a power unlike anything you've ever seen. They can track us across entire galaxies, and they've sent a force to find us. They'll stop at nothing to destroy us." The fear in her voice made Yi-I's heart race. He had always thought of the universe as a peaceful place, but now he was learning that there were dark forces out there, forces that could destroy everything. "Is there any way to stop them?" Yi asked, his voice barely a whisper. Lyra's eyes darkened, and for a moment she seemed lost in thought. "There's a way," she said finally, "but it's dangerous. The only way to stop them is to find the source of their power, the one thing that controls them. If we can destroy that, they'll lose everything. But we don't know where it is, and they'll be looking for us, searching for us." Yi felt a chill run down his spine. He had no idea how he could help them, but he knew one thing for sure. There was no turning back now. He had already promised to protect them, and now he would do whatever it took to help them fight this battle. As Lyra turned to leave, she paused at the door and looked back at Ye. "You've made a choice, whether you realize it or not. You're part of this now. You're part of our fight." Yi stood in silence, his heart pounding in his chest. He had always thought of himself as an ordinary man, living a simple life. But now everything had changed. He was caught in a battle that wasn't his own, but he couldn't just walk away. The danger was too real, and the truth was clear. He couldn't protect them if he didn't understand what he was up against. As the door closed behind Lyra, Yi stood there, lost in his thoughts. The fire in the hearth crackled softly, casting long shadows on the walls. Outside, the wind howled through the trees, and Yi couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was coming. The storm was brewing, and it was only a matter of time before it would hit. The alien hunters arrived the days after Lyra's revelation were filled with a new kind of tension. You couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of the leaves outside, felt like a warning. It wasn't just his imagination anymore. He could sense it in the air, in the way the wind shifted. The threat Lyra had spoken about it was real, and it was getting closer. Lyra and Alira kept mostly to themselves, retreating into their own world. Lyra spent long hours by the window, her eyes scanning the horizon. Alira would often sit in silence, her small hands folded in her lap, her eyes distant. She looked lost, as if the weight of what was coming had already taken its toll on her. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the forest began to darken, the stillness of the night was shattered by a sound, a low, rumbling hum. It was distant at first, but it grew louder, vibrating the air around Yi-I's cottage. It wasn't a sound he'd ever heard before. It wasn't natural. He stood up, his heart pounding. He looked toward the door, then back at Lyra, who was staring out the window with a look of deep concern on her face. Her eyes met his, and she didn't need to say anything for him to understand. The hunters had arrived. He rushed to the door, but Lyra was faster. She was already standing in front of it, her hand raised, signaling for him to stay quiet. She stepped forward, and Ye followed her out into the night. The hum was now deafening, a deep, mechanical sound that seemed to shake the very ground beneath their feet. You could see strange lights flickering in the distance, moving through the trees. They were coming, the alien hunters, the very beings that had destroyed Lyra's home planet. Lyra turned to Yi, her face pale, her voice tight with urgency. "They're here. We don't have much time. What do we do?" he asked, his voice shaky. His heart was racing, and his mind was clouded with panic. How could he protect them from something so powerful? What could he possibly do? Lyra's expression was hard, her eyes steely with determination. "Stay close to me. Don't make a sound. And don't go outside unless I say so. They can track us by sound, by movement. We have to stay hidden." Yi nodded, his stomach twisting. With fear, he had no idea what was coming, but he knew one thing for sure. This was no longer just about helping to lost souls. This was about survival. They moved swiftly, ducking behind the trees and staying out of sight. The hum grew louder, and now you could see the shadows of the ships overhead, dark shapes moving against the night sky. They were circling, scanning the ground below. It was like something out of a nightmare. Yi-I's breath caught in his throat. As the ships lowered closer to the ground, their searchlights sweeping across the forest floor. The beams of light cut through the darkness like knives, illuminating the trees and the underbrush. They were getting closer. He could hear the voices of the hunters, now low and guttural, speaking in a language he didn't understand. "Ah. They... are they speaking?" Yi whispered to Lyra, his voice barely audible. Lyra nodded, her eyes dark with worry. "They are. They've been looking for us for a long time. And now they've found us." He felt the blood drain from his face. The hunters had found them. There was no running now. They were too close. The ships hovered above them, casting long, eerie shadows on the ground. The trees rustled in the wind as the searchlights moved past them, but they stayed still, barely breathing. They had to wait. They had to remain hidden. Minutes felt like hours. Ye's legs were starting to ache, but he didn't dare move. Lyra stood still, her body tense, her eyes never leaving the searchlights above. Lyra was close by, her small body pressed against Yi-I's side, her face pale with fear. Then, just when he thought they might be caught, the lights moved away. The ships shifted, turning in a different direction, scanning the forest in a new pattern. Lyra didn't move at first. She watched the ships with narrowed eyes, her breath steady. After what seemed like an eternity, she whispered, "Dave." "Past, but we're not safe yet." Yi let out a breath he didn't realize he had been holding. He glanced at Lyra, his voice shaky. "What now? How do we stop them?" Lyra turned to him, her eyes filled with a mix of fear and determination. "We don't stop them here. We have to move. They'll be back, and they'll bring more forces. We need to leave the forest. We need to find the source of their power and destroy it." Yi-I's mind was racing. He hadn't signed up for this. He hadn't expected to be fighting against an enemy so powerful, so relentless. But now, it was clear. The stakes were higher than he could have ever imagined. And they couldn't stay in the safety of his cottage any longer. What if we can't find it? What if we fail? He asked, fear creeping into his voice. Lyra's eyes softened for a brief moment, and she placed a hand on his shoulder. We won't fail. Not if we stick together. We've already come too far. Yi nodded, his heart still pounding in his chest. He didn't know what would happen next, but he knew one thing: he couldn't back down now. They were in this together, and he would protect them with everything he had. As they retreated deeper into the forest, the hunters' ships faded into the distance. But Yi knew that this was only the beginning. The battle had started, and there was no turning back. The trail in the shadows, the days following their narrow escape from the hunters, were filled with a constant sense of tension. Why I could no longer ignore the weight of the danger they were in. The hunters had come so close, and now they were on the move, trying to stay one step ahead of them. They traveled deeper into the forest, moving quickly and quietly, careful to avoid detection. Lyra had grown more reserved since the encounter, her focus sharp, her eyes constantly scanning the surroundings. Alira, too, had become quieter, her usual curiosity replaced by a nervous energy that you couldn't quite understand. She seemed to sense that something was about to change, something worse than what they had already faced. As they made camp one evening, Yi sat by the fire, his thoughts racing. The weight of the situation pressed on him. He had promised to protect them, but how could he protect them from something so powerful, so relentless? And now, Lyra was talking about finding the source of the hunter's power. But how could they even begin to do that? He stared into the fire, trying to push the fear aside. But then, a voice broke the silence. "We need to talk," Lyra said, stepping out from the shadows. Her voice was calm, but there was something in her eyes that made Yi's stomach tighten. He turned to her, his heart pounding in his chest. "What is it?" "There's something you need to know," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. She looked around, as if making sure no one was listening. "You've been helping us, but there's a part of the story I've kept from you. A part I wasn't ready to tell." You frowned, unsure of where this conversation was going. "What do you mean? What is it?" Lyra paused, taking a deep breath before continuing. "I didn't come here just to hide. I came because I need something. From you, something that I didn't want to ask for. And I wasn't sure how you would react." Yi's heart skipped a beat. "What do you need from me?" Lyra's eyes locked with his. "You're not just protecting us. You're the key to stopping the hunters." The words hit Yi like a punch to the gut. "What do you mean, I'm the key?" he asked, his voice trembling. "I'm just a man. How can I possibly be the key to stopping them?" Lyra stepped closer, her expression serious. "You've already proven yourself. You've already shown us that you're willing to fight for us. But there's more to it than that. The hunters, they have a weakness I didn't want to tell you about. But you need to know." Yi's mind raced. He felt like the ground beneath him was shifting, like the truth was slipping through his fingers. "What is it? What's their weakness?" "There's a relic," Lyra said, her voice barely audible. "A powerful artifact that controls their power. And it's hidden somewhere on Earth. I've been searching for it for years, but I couldn't find it alone. I needed help. I needed you." Yi was speechless. He had no idea what she was talking about. But there was something in her eyes, something desperate, that told him this wasn't just a simple request. She was asking him for something big, Something dangerous. You're telling me I'm supposed to help you find this artifact? He asked, his voice shaky. How do I even begin to look for something like that? What makes me the one to help you? Lyra's gaze softened, and she placed a hand on his shoulder. You're the only one who can help us. The hunters are tracking us, but they can't track you. You're still human. You're still one of them. That's why you're the key. Yi felt a cold shiver run down his spine. He hadn't signed up for this. He had only wanted to help to lost souls. He never expected to be dragged into an intergalactic war. But now, everything was different. He had made a promise, and he couldn't back out. I don't know if I can do this, Yi admitted, his voice barely a whisper. I don't know if I'm strong enough. Lyra looked at him with a mixture of sadness and understanding. I know it's a lot to ask, but you've already chosen your path. You've already chosen to protect us. You're stronger than you think. Before Yi could respond, a sudden movement in the shadows caught his attention. A figure stepped out from the trees, and Yi's heart dropped. It was a manner stranger, someone Yi didn't recognize, but there was something about him that made Yi's blood run cold. The man was wearing a dark cloak, his face hidden in the shadows, but Yi could feel the danger radiating from him. Lyra's face went pale. No, it can't be. The man stepped forward, his voice low and menacing. You didn't think you could hide forever, did you? He felt his stomach drop as the figure's words sank in. This was no ordinary man. This was one of the hunters, and he had found them. Lyra's expression hardened. You shouldn't have come here, she said, her voice filled with anger. You have no idea what you're dealing with. The hunter laughed darkly. I know exactly what I'm dealing with. And now it's time for you to pay for what you've done. He stood frozen, his heart racing. The peaceful life he had known was gone. There was no turning back now. Lyra moved quickly, her eyes flashing with a dangerous light. She raised her hand, and a crackling energy filled the air. The hunter stepped back, his eyes narrowing, but he didn't flinch. You can't protect him, the hunter sneered. You've already made your choice, Lyra. Now it's time to face the consequences. Ye's world seemed to slow down as he watched the confrontation unfold. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about something much bigger. And now he was trapped in the middle of it. The final decision, the night air was thick with tension as the hunter stood before them, his dark cloak flowing in the wind. Yi's heart pounded in his chest as he tried to process everything happening around him. The peaceful life he had known was slipping away with each passing moment. He had made promises to protect Lyra and Alira, to stand by them no matter what. But now, facing the hunter, the weight of those promises felt heavier than ever before. Lyra stepped in front of Yi, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. The energy that surrounded her seemed to hum with power, like something ancient and dangerous. Alira stood behind her, her small body trembling with fear. You could see the uncertainty in her eyes. She had been through so much already, and now the threat they had been running from had finally caught up to them. Leave now, Lyra commanded, her voice calm but filled with authority. You're not welcome here. The hunter's cold laugh echoed through the night. You think you can stop me? You've been running for too long. It's time to end this. You could see the danger in the hunter's eyes. This wasn't just a fight for survival. It was something much deeper. The hunter wasn't here just to kill. He was here to destroy everything they had worked for, to destroy Lyra, Alira, and him. Lyra raised her hand, and the air around them seemed to crackle with power. "You don't understand," she said, her voice low but steady. "You have no idea what you're up against." The hunter's smile faded. "I know exactly what I'm up against, Lyra, and I'm here to make sure you never escape again." The ground beneath Wai's feet seemed to shift, and suddenly he felt a deep sense of fear for the future, for the decision he now had to make. The world around him felt like it was closing in, and there was no easy way out. He had promised to protect them, but now, in the face of such danger, he wasn't sure how much protection he could give. Lyra's voice broke through his thoughts. "Yea," she said softly, her eyes filled with both sorrow and determination. "This is it. The moment we've been preparing for. We have to stop him, or we'll never be free." He looked at her, his mind racing. She was right. There was no running anymore, no more hiding. The hunters would never stop coming, and if they didn't fight back now, they would lose everything. He turned to Alira, who was looking at him with wide, terrified eyes. He knew what he had to do. He had made a promise to protect them, and this was the moment that promise would be tested. "You're right," he said, his voice steady despite the fear in his heart. "We can't keep running. We have to end this now." Lyra nodded, her expression softening. "I knew you'd understand. Together we can stop him." The hunter's eyes narrowed, and his lips curled into a sneer. "You think you can defeat me? You're nothing more than a human." Ye's anger flared, but he didn't let it control him. Instead, he focused on the task at hand. They had come too far to back down now. The fight for their survival had come to a head, and he wasn't about to let this hunter win. Lyra stepped forward, her hands glowing with energy. "This ends tonight." The hunter lunged, his speed almost blinding, but Lyra was faster. With a quick movement, she sent a blast of energy toward him. The hunter barely had time to react, but he managed to block the attack with a shield of his own. Wai's heart raced as he watched the battle unfold before him. He had never seen Lyra fight like this before. Her power was unlike anything he had imagined. But the hunter was strong, and the clash of their powers filled the air with a deafening roar. Alira stepped beside Yi, her face pale but determined. "We have to help her," she said, her voice small but full of resolve. "We can't let him win." He looked at her, then at Lyra, who was struggling to hold her ground against the hunter. He didn't know how, but he knew he had to do something. He had to make a choice. Without thinking, he rushed forward, joining Lyra in the battle. He didn't know if he could fight like they could, but he had to try. He couldn't just stand there and watch them fight alone. He reached for the nearest Wipana's simple dagger lying on the ground and held it tightly in his hand. It was small, but it was something. It might not be much, but it was all he had. "Stay back, Lyra shouted as she fought the hunter. "It's too dangerous." But Yi wasn't listening. He couldn't. He had already chosen. He had already promised to protect them, and he wasn't going to back down now. With a surge of energy, Yi rushed at the hunter, aiming the dagger toward him. The hunter saw him coming and twisted, knocking the weapon from Wai's hand with a powerful strike. But it was enough to distract him, just for a moment. In that moment of distraction, Lyra unleashed her full power, sending a wave of energy so strong that it shattered the hunter's shield. With a final blinding burst, the hunter collapsed. To the ground, defeated. He stood panting, his body aching, his mind spinning. They had won, but at what cost? The battle was over, but the war was far from won. The hunters would come again, and they would be ready. Lyra walked over to him, her expression both exhausted and relieved. "You did it," she said softly. "We did it." Yi looked at her, his heart still racing. "I didn't do it alone. We're in this together." As the night fell quiet, Yi realized that his life would never be the same. He had made his choice. He had decided to fight for something bigger than himself, for a future he never expected. But the road ahead would be long and dangerous. The battle was over, but the fight for their survival had only just begun.